So I got this comment on one of my videos recently about my experience with the TOCFL test and how it went, and I left a little comment there on the video, but I thought I could actually talk about my entire experience with the TOCFL test, and if you're interested in taking it, some things that you might want to practice or look out for, and what you can expect when you're actually taking the test itself. I did take the test over 2.5 years ago, so it's been a little bit, but I did double check all the information I'm about to say on the TOCFL website itself. And it should be more or less the same. So for those of you who don't know, there are two popular standardized Chinese tests, and that's the HSK and the TOCFL. There are other ones too, but those are the most mainstream ones. And the HSK is going to be more popular globally and in China especially. But if you want to take the test in traditional characters, I think you have to take it in have to take the TOCFL or some other test. The HSK does not offer tests in traditional Chinese for some reason. You can, however, take the TOCFL in simplified Chinese if you want to. And typically when I talk about Chinese levels, I use the separate scale, so A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, and C2, where A1 is like pretty basic, beginner level, B1 is kind of conversational, B2 is approaching fluency, and C1 is pretty good, and then C2 would be like native-like. And so one benefit of taking the TOCFL over the HSK too is it'll test for higher levels. So it'll actually test for C1 and C2, whereas the HSK does not. I've seen claims that it does, but from what I've read on the Wikipedia and just from what I've seen online, that's not really the case. I think if you want to take a more advanced test, then you should definitely take the TOCFL instead. So I'm going to talk about my experience with the TOCFL test. I took an adaptive reading and listening test, and I took a pilot writing and speaking test. So about 2.5 years ago when I took the writing test, I was one of the first groups to take it. They didn't really have it at that time. And that's actually why I took the TOCFL, because I got a free test because I participated in the pilot of the test. I wasn't actually going to take it because I didn't want to pay for it, but I got a free test, so I thought, why not? If you do not take an adaptive test like I did, typically the TOCFL will divide tests into bands. They have a novice band, an A band, B band, and C band. So each band is also divided by 2 levels. So the A band, B band, and C band will kind of equate to a set for A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2. They're not exactly equivalent, and I'll show a screenshot up here of what TOCFL claims on their website. You'll see there's a little bit of a difference, but they're more or less the same. And yeah, if you're not sure what your level is and you've never taken a standardized language test before, you might be interested in taking an adaptive test instead. And an adaptive test is a kind of test where it gets harder the more questions you get right, and it gets easier the more questions you get wrong. So one benefit, like I said, is if you don't know what your level is, it's a pretty good test to take because you're not going to lose any money if you accidentally take a test that's too easy for you or way too hard for you. But the downside is there's that kind of psychological aspect where if you have a series of questions that are kind of difficult, and then all of a sudden you see one that's kind of easy for you, you might think, oh no, I just answered all of those questions wrong. That might not be the case, but if you're someone like me who might overthink too much in that situation, that could definitely affect your test taking abilities. So consider that. If you're someone where you think that won't really bother you that much, then go ahead and take it. I don't think it bothered me too much, but definitely something that was on my mind during the test. If you want to sign up for an adaptive test, it's under a CAT test on their website. That stands for Computerized Adaptive Test. So yeah, if you're interested in more information, you can check that out on the website as well. I'll leave links down below for everything that I mentioned too. So let's talk about the reading test that I took first. It is 60 minutes long, and the site says you're expected to answer around 35 questions in that time. But you only have to answer 25 to avoid being penalized. So one thing I do want to mention and place extra emphasis on here is when I took the test, I did not know that there were essentially endless questions, at least when I took it. And they just expect you to take the test for the whole allotted amount of time. So I thought I was running out of time and there's a final question that I have to get to. So towards the end, I started guessing. Which was a huge mistake. And we'll talk more about this in a second, but my reading score ended up being lower than my listening score, and I don't think that's actually the case. Just from my own personal experience, I think my reading is a little bit better than my listening. I had a test proctor come up to me towards the end and said, oh, don't guess, you're meant to go on. So I slowed down a little bit for the last few minutes of the exam, but I did think that impacted my score, and we'll again talk about my scores towards the end. But if you're going to take the test, I would recommend just shooting for 25 questions, and then taking the rest of the test at your own pace. And again, quick disclaimer, that's how it is right now. That's what I see on their website right now. But if you're gonna take the test, do a little bit of research beforehand, double check that those numbers are right, and you should be good to go. So regarding the content on the test, I don't remember many of the easier questions, but for the harder questions, most of them were either news snippets or they were interviews. And the typical questions that I would get about those prompts, those sections of reading, I would be like, what did so-and-so mean when they said this? Or what was so-and-so's response to this question? And usually they would be a little bit different in the way they word the question versus how it's actually written in the article. And I think that's because they want to test your comprehension. They don't want to test your ability to scan for certain characters. However, one thing that I thought was kind of interesting was there weren't as many like Chengyu or Wenyanwen that I was expecting to see. For those of you who don't know, that means like Chinese idioms or classical Chinese. I do remember, however, there was a lot of Shu Mianyu, which is very similar to Wenyanwen, classical Chinese, but it's more like literary Chinese, modern, like professional Chinese. And that is super important if you're going to take the reading or the writing test. I would definitely make sure to spend a lot of extra time on reviewing your Shu Mianyu. Some ways that you can practice your Shu Mianyu is by reading newspapers. A lot of those will have very professional language. Watching the news too, if you are more of a listener. As long as you're getting the vocabulary, I think it should be okay. But of course, reading is just going to be a real test of your vocabulary and your understanding of grammar. So onto the listening portion of the test. The site also says it's around 35 questions and it should be around 50 minutes. It says there are picture description and single round dialogue questions for the lower levels, but I don't remember any of those questions on my test. And most of my questions were either monologues or dialogues. I thought the questions and answers were repeated. That's what I remember happening, but according to the site, that might not be the case. You might only be able to hear the question once and then answer once as well. I would take a practice test to make sure that that's the case, but at least that's what I'm seeing on the website, is they don't repeat it. So what I would do to prepare for this test is actually, of course, listen to Chinese, get a lot of exposure to Chinese, especially more advanced Chinese. However, I would also practice like taking notes. I would practice like trying to remember a lot of details. I think at higher levels where the questions are going to be longer, the more difficult part is not actually comprehending what they said, it's remembering what they said. You might get a question, you're like, oh, I totally remember they talked about this, and then not remember what they actually said. So I would just make sure you do a lot of listening practice, of course, but maybe do some practice tests to get a hold of like what common questions they're going to be asking and what things you should be paying attention to when they're speaking. That way, when you go to take notes, you know like what might be an important detail and what might not be. So the next test that I took was the writing test. And like I said, this was a pilot test, so it might have changed a little bit differently, and I think it has. But the exact characters that you're expected to write, the time that you have to have, and the prompts are all listed on their website. Not the exact prompts, but the kind of category of what you're supposed to be able to write are on the website. So I'll show this here for each different level if you're interested in taking those. These are not adaptive tests, obviously, because they're just prompts. So if you want to take these tests, they will be band specific, not like the reading and listening test that I took. These are also type tests, so don't worry about handwriting. You don't have to handwrite these tests at all. You can type in Zhuyin or Pinyin, and I think that might be it. They might have Tangjie if you need it, but most foreigners who learn Chinese, I'm assuming, should know Pinyin, so that's available for you there. The first prompt that I had was writing a letter, and the second prompt that I had was about summarizing an interview. And that seems to coincide with the test descriptions that I see for the higher levels now as well. Like I mentioned, with the reading portion of the test, I would definitely emphasize practicing Shu Mianyu, because this is your chance, especially in the writing portion, to show all of the like advanced vocabulary and the super advanced grammar structures that you know, because this is the time where you'll have actually time to think about what you want to say and write in more advanced Chinese with Shu Mianyu. So besides basic writing skills and be able to get your point across and your argumentative abilities in the language, that seems to be the largest differentiating factor between B2, C1, and C2. is your grammar and vocabulary usage. For the speaking test, I don't remember the specific prompt that I had. I do remember it was very hard for me to understand. So they actually give you a video prompt, so this will test your listening abilities a little bit as well. And then after that, you'll have an allotted amount of time to think about your response for some questions. And then you'll have to speak for an allotted amount of time. And you are expected to speak for the whole time, from what I understand. That's what my professors told me as well in university. You are expected to speak as much as possible. And I will show the levels here, the different lengths you're expected to speak and kinds of questions you'll have up on screen here. So if you're interested in a specific level, you can take a look at that. The shortest questions, it seems, for B band is 40 seconds, and the longest for C band is up to 3 minutes. So yeah, talking for 3 minutes straight is not super easy if you haven't thought a long time about what you really want to talk about. You do get, like I said, some time to think, so that's good, but it's still not easy to think about what to say for 3 minutes straight. So talk slow, that's something I would recommend you do. Not at a speed where it sounds like you're not fluent, but definitely slower than I'm talking right now. You want to be able to show off your fluency, your vocabulary, your use of grammar, your ability to think on the spot, your ability to get your point across. You know, obviously make sure that you understand the prompt itself. But yeah, you should probably speak a little bit slower than normal, at least if you're a fast talker like me. That way you can stretch what you have to say across that 3 minute arc. Again, for this, definitely do practice. I would look up some speaking test prompts and record yourself doing those and listening to those over again. I would practice being spontaneous with your speaking and practice talking for a long amount of time. That's something that you struggle to do. That's definitely something that I struggled with when I was taking those tests. You get your point across pretty early on, and then you think, oh, I have to still talk about this for 30 more seconds. I don't know what to do. So definitely practice that. If I was gonna take this test again today, that's probably what I would do, is record myself speaking Chinese. Okay, so now for the fun portion of the video, let's talk about my scores. So like I said, I took the adaptive reading and listening test, and I took a pilot and speaking and writing test, and I took these about 2.5 years ago. That was during my last semester of university. So I also mentioned that little hiccup I had with the reading test. So my score is a little bit lower than I expected. So for my reading test, I got a 68, and for the listening test, I got a 70. That's not out of 100, by the way. The cutoff for level 5, which is around a C1, was 70. So I did get a C1 in, well, the C1 equivalent in the TOCFL on the listening test, but for the reading test, I was just 2 points shy of it. So a high B2, I guess. I would say my reading and listening both have improved a lot over the last couple of years, especially as I've been doing interpreting and translating for work professionally. So I don't think getting a C1 would be a challenge at all today. I don't think I'm ready for C2 though. So I'm not really sure if I'm interested in taking another test. I might wait until I'm ready for C2. So my results for the speaking and writing test were a little bit less specific. I didn't have point values, but they did give me a level equivalent as well. So on the speaking test, I got high advanced, which is around a B2. It's like the same as my reading score. And then for my writing, I got a fluent, which would be like a C1. I'm not actually as confident in my speaking ability since I don't practice it that much. I don't speak in Chinese at a high level very often. So that kind of reflects what I actually think about my speaking versus writing in regards to my output. I do write a lot more, especially for work now, since my translation is all written. So yeah, that's probably pretty accurate. I would say besides my reading score, I wasn't really surprised by any of those results. I did think I would get a C1 on writing too, but it could just be because I wasn't really experienced with speaking for such a long time at that point, without like talking about something that I was really interested in or talking with friends, something like that. Could also have to do with my vocabulary usage at that time. I'm not really sure what my speaking vocab, my working vocab was like at that time. I'd be interested in taking a test again, but I'm not really sure if I want to do that before I'm at a C2 level or just go again. Maybe I could just do a band C test this next time. I should probably do it before I leave Taiwan might be a little bit easier for me to take it here. So yeah, that's my experience with the TOCFL. If you've taken the HSK or the TOCFL before, I'd like to hear your thoughts. If you experienced anything different from what I said here, I'd also like to know about that. It's been a while since I've taken the test, so I'm not sure if this is exactly how it'd be like today. There definitely could be some changes. If there's any other questions you guys have about the TOCFL itself or Chinese learning, definitely leave those down below. I also do travel videos and some tattoo stuff, some art stuff. So if you were interested in that, along with languages, definitely subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.